Vagartha viva sampraktau, Vagartha pratipataye, Jagatav pitarau vande, Parvati parameshwarau. What if the path to something deeper does not begin with belief or effort, but with a small shift in how we see? In the Linga Purana, the journey does not begin with instruction, but with a quiet change in perspective. And Lord Shiva is not presented as something distant, not as a form to be reached or a presence to be found somewhere else. Lord Shiva is described as something much closer, something already here, the presence through which everything exists. The Linga, the image, the temple, they're not the destination. They are simply starting points, ways for the mind to settle and turn inward without pressure or force. And then, almost unexpectedly, the focus shifts. Even the Devas, those we imagine as powerful and free, are described as still bound, and not outwardly but inwardly. We're all called Pashu, being tied to something subtle, something not immediately visible. And when this becomes clear to them, they do not ask for more power or greater control. They ask something much simpler. How does one become free? And what they receive is the Pāśupata path. It is not presented as something complex or demanding. It feels more like a quiet turning, a way of slowly noticing what holds you, the habits, the reactions, the constant identification of I'm this, I'm that. And instead of resisting it, the path allows it to soften on its own. The practice may take years or months or even days, but that is not what defines it. What matters is the honesty with which we stay with it. The Devas themselves walk this path, and nothing dramatic is described. No sudden transformation, no moment of arrival, just a quiet shift. The sense of being bound begins to loosen. What they thought they were no longer feels so solid. And without forcing anything, that identity begins to fade. They are no longer standing apart from Lord Shiva, trying to reach him, and that distance itself begins to dissolve. The Linga Purana teaching then comes even closer into something that can be lived. It speaks of simple acts, the preparation of the linga, the offering of water, flowers, light, small things. But they're not really about the objects. They are about returning again and again to the same space with attention. Over time, that repetition steadies the mind without effort. There is also a quiet emphasis on how one lives alongside the practice, the truthfulness, the simplicity, and a kind of natural calm. Not as rules, but as conditions that make things clearer. Nothing is rejected. Even desire is not pushed away. If someone comes with needs, with wants, with expectation, the Linga Purana loves it. It acknowledges it. And yet, alongside that, something else begins to grow. A different kind of clarity. And slowly, what once felt heavy begins to loosen. So the movement remains quiet. We begin somewhere with form, with action, even with need. We stay with it, maybe not perfectly, but sincerely. And over time, something shifts, not outside, but in the way we see. And then one day, without trying to conclude everything, it becomes obvious that what felt like bondage was never holding us in the way we thought. And what we were moving toward was never somewhere else. There is something very simple and at the same time very deep in the Linga Purana's teaching. The 5-syllabled mantra, Namah Shivaya, is not introduced as just another practice. It is described as something that quietly holds everything together. Even with everything dissolves, the forms, the names, the worlds, the Linga Purana says this remains, holding within it the essence of knowledge itself. It is not long, it's not complicated, but complete. not because of its form, but because of what it points to. Lord Shiva is not separate from the mantra, and the mantra is simply a way of returning again and again until the distance between the two no longer feels real. There is also something grounded in how it is approached. It is not rushed. It is received with care, repeated with attention, and with awareness. Because the sound is not the goal, it is the awareness behind it that matters. Over time, even the repetition changes. What begins outwardly becomes softer, quieter, more inward. And as it moves inward, something else falls away. Naturally, distraction. Distraction loses its hold. The Linga Purana text even says something direct, that all rituals and austerities do not equal even a fraction of this kind of quiet repetition. Not because they are lesser, but because this moves directly toward the source. But even here, something important remains. It is not only about the mantra, but about how one lives with it. The truthfulness, the simplicity, the awareness in small things. Without all that, repetition becomes empty. With it, it deepens on its own. And slowly, something shifts. The mind, once restless, begins to return inward more easily. Control does not come through force, it comes naturally. And then, almost without noticing, what we were seeking begins to feel closer than expected, as something quietly present. And in that moment, the mantra is no longer something you're doing. It is simply there, like something that was always present, but is now finally noticed. Now, the Linga Purana builds up to something tender in the story of Andhaka. When the demon king Hiranyaksha performed penance to please Lord Shiva and sought a child, Lord Shiva granted him one and named him Andhaka, the one who is blind. Andhaka was shaped by strength and driven by ambition. Through intense penance, he becomes nearly invincible. He conquers the worlds, overpowers the Devas, and even Lord Indra cannot stand before him. Everything he reaches for, he takes. And yet, nothing in this power brings clarity. It only deepens a kind of blindness. At some point, that blindness turns into desire, a movement to possess even what cannot be possessed. And in that, Andhaka stands in opposition to Lord Shiva. When the Devas turn to Lord Shiva, there is no delay. Lord Shiva simply appears, and in that presence, everything changes. What seemed vast and unshakable begins to dissolve. The armies fall, the powers fade, and Andhaka himself is lifted upon the trident. And then the story becomes quiet. There is no resistance, no anger, only recognition. Stripped of everything, Andhaka now begins to see. Not outwardly, but inwardly. For the first time, there is no reaching, no claiming, only clarity. He realizes that this moment is not separate, that there was always a connection to Lord Shiva, unseen but never absent. And in that seeing, something softens for him. There is no more fight, no more demand, only a turning. And when Lord Shiva offers him a boon, Andhaka asks for nothing but devotion. And that changes everything. Lord Shiva grants it and raises him, not as one forgiven, but as one transformed. He becomes the chief among the Shivaganas. There is no judgment, no past carried forward, only a complete shift. And perhaps that is what remains. That transformation does not come from being perfect, but from seeing clearly even at the very end. And maybe that is what stays, that even when things feel lost or unsettled, there is something deeper that quietly restores. Something that does not rush, does not force, but just simply remains. And in that, something becomes clear. Nothing here is asking you to become something else, and nothing is asking you to reach somewhere far. It is only pointing gently back to what has always been here, back to Mahadev. And when that is seen, there is nothing left to hold, nothing left to become, only something simple already present, Mahadev. May Jagatpita Mahadev bless us all. Keep seeking, keep chanting, keep surrendering. Om Namah Shivaya.